Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about basketball. We're going to dive into the Bojan Bogdanovic to the Detroit Pistons trade. Uh, I absolutely love this trade. I don't know about you. What did you think of this, Spins? This is beautiful. It was Bojan Bogdanovic for Kelly Olynyk and Saban Lee. Uh, this deal caught me by surprise for a number of reasons because just we'll talk about the Utah side of it, but even like some people, I think were a little bit surprised that Detroit wanted to go down this road. And I'm not. This is the kind of aggressive move that Troy Weaver has always made since he's been in charge of the Detroit Pistons. And I love it. I think it makes a lot of sense for Detroit to do this. So let's talk about it from the Detroit side first. What is Detroit getting in Bojan Bogdanovic?
Well, they're obviously getting a veteran type of scorer. And the surprise for a lot of people who didn't think Detroit would pull the trigger on a deal like this was the fact that, Bogdanovic is a veteran, and the perception of Detroit was that they're gearing up for more of a long-term run in the Eastern Conference. So why would they be going after a guy who, is already well into his 30s? But I think Troy Weaver is really smart to recognize that he has what he believes is the young core in Detroit with guys like Jaden Ivey, Cade Cunningham, and Jalen Duren. And too many times we have young rosters that are just completely devoid of shooting. And this is a great addition to find a veteran who can come in and space the floor effectively to be able to see how Cade and Jaden in particular react to operating out of the pick and roll and being able to be primary creators in a floor that's properly spaced for NBA basketball. That's one thing that always irks me about a lot of these rebuilding projects is you look at them and in years 1, 2, and 3, they're in the bottom 2 or 3 league wide in 3-point field goal percentage. I don't think Detroit's going to be that way anymore. It was a huge issue for them last year with Cade Cunningham. When you add another handler into the mix in Jaden Ivey, you need to be able to space the floor properly. So Saddiq Bey, Bojan Bogdanovic, maybe you add a guy like Isaiah Livers in there where he can give you consistent rotation minutes. There are a lot of wings that are going to provide that spacing. So now it's time to see how much Cade and Jaden Ivey grow. As a guy who loved both of them and had top 3 grades in each of their draft classes, I absolutely love being able to see how they're going to react to this early on in their careers.
Well, and think about just the lineup construction that the Pistons are going to be able to run out here. Like they got Alec Burks, right? Alec Burks is a 40% 3-point shooter. Bojan Bogdanovic is one of the best spot 3-point shooters in the league. Saddiq Bey is an awesome 3-point shooter. Isaiah Livers is an awesome 3-point shooter. Isaiah Stewart, I think they have like some general hope that he can become a 3-point shooter in the future. Frank Jackson has knocked down threes in the past for sure, especially off the catch. Like they have some real dudes that can now shoot and space it around Cade Cunningham, which is something that he was missing last year. And it's the offense that he will particularly thrive in. This is a guy that processes the game in a very similar way to Luka Doncic. And look at the way that Dallas has surrounded Luka with shooting, with spacing, with versatility, positional versatility across the board. I think it's going to be really valuable. And then, by the way, do I think that giving Marvin Bagley $12 million a year was a good idea? I don't. But do I think that surrounding Marvin Bagley with 3 shooters and Cade Cunningham could actually make Marvin Bagley like kind of thrive a little bit and could be the pick and roll dive weapon that Cade Cunningham needs? Kind of. Like, I think that actually it helps make their roster fit together. And on top of it, I think that like Bojan's offensive creation is a little bit underrated. He's a really good processor of the game as well. And on top of it, like, for instance, like if you want to run him in second units with Jaden Ivey, right? If you don't want to start Jaden Ivey, it's going to be really helpful to have someone like Bojan out there. You can just kind of toss the ball to Bojan in the mid post. And he's like a really effective creator, like on the block, taking advantage of mismatches. You can run a lot of really interesting creative sets to make it work. I love this move for the Detroit Pistons. Like across the board, I think it just makes complete and total sense. And I think this is the kind of thing, like you mentioned, that organizations just don't do often enough. They don't surround young guys with older vets that makes sense for their games and will help develop them. Bojan is an awesome spot shooter, especially from the corners. Cade is going to find him so often off of pick and rolls. It's going to be awesome. They're going to just absolutely thrive, I think, this year, that combination. And by the way, like, you have another guy that can create shots in Bojan, especially like off of closeouts and attacking from the mid post and then kicking out. Cade's a great spot up shooter as well. This is the kind of move that I think just completely actualizes Cade. It's the kind of move that I think makes a lot of sense with Jaden Ivey as well, as a player that, you know, is going to take shooting, especially early in his career, to thrive around. All around, like, this is a home run move for me for Detroit, just because on top of it, they didn't have to give up anything else.
Yes.
Like, they didn't have to give up any long-term asset. Like, all due respect to Saben Lee, but I think that, you know, the train left the tracks, or whatever you want to say, when they drafted Jaden Ivey, who is another like extremely athletic guard that is going to be like the complement to Cade, right? So they didn't have to give up anything. They just had to take on some money at the end of the day, and they get this guy that's really going to help their team develop as they continue to go through this young process of building this group.
I think it's a home run move in every single regard. Like, a lot of people are going to focus on Bogdanovic's age, being 33, or maybe some of the defensive missteps that he has, but he averaged 18 a game last year. And that's a lot of production to be able to bring in when you lost Jeremy Grant earlier on in the offseason. You know, if you look at the aggregate of those two deals with Jeremy Grant and with this one, they essentially gave up Jeremy, the pick that turned into being Ishmael Kamagate, Saben Lee, and Kelly Olynyk. So Jeremy and kind of pieces that may, come into fruition down the line, or were more salary fillers for Bogdanovic, first round pick, 2 future seconds, and Prachita. That's a really good overall haul, because I think Bogdanovic fits better stylistically on the offensive end of the floor around what they need with this younger core. And they have future assets to be able to burn as a result of it. They didn't give up any draft equity in order to get Bojan, which is really important to me. As soon as they drafted Jaden Ivey, you're right. Saben Lee, as much as I like the intrigue of him, wasn't really going to be a great fit there in Detroit. So this is the definition of asset management and, you know, moves made by Troy Weaver to just get all of the pieces in sync right away.
And let's move to the Utah side of this. Can you figure this out for Utah?
I'm surprised that they didn't end up getting some sort of a pick, or a valuable pick, for Bogdanovic. I thought that he would have commanded somewhere in the range of a late first, a heavily protected first, maybe 2 valuable seconds along with salary filler. And
for what it's worth, Andy Larson over in Utah did say that the Jazz had late first round picks on the table. I believe he writes for the Tribune, Salt Lake Tribune over there in Utah. They had late first round picks on the table for Bojan, but it would have involved taking on future salary.
Right.
I don't know why they weren't willing to do that. Like, all of their books, like, they're actually pretty locked in terms of their books until 2024. I can't imagine that like a team was making them take salary like way into the future. All of the teams were making them take salary way into the future, like into 2025 even. In a Bojan trade, I mean, so here's what this deal does for them. It opens like a $6.5 million trade exception. It opens $6.5 million away from the luxury tax. This is a team that weirdly actually was very close to the luxury tax because they were competing so hard with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. So it does create space for them from the luxury tax. And on top of it, like, I guess there are early season implications where every loss for them matters. Getting rid of Bojan probably helps them increase their lottery odds and thus give them a better chance to get Victor Wembanyama. I just don't think this team is good enough. Like, they're good enough to be pesky. They have enough veterans to be annoying on any given night. And if they're guys, like, particularly, they have a lot of like variance-based shooters, right? Like, if Lauri Markkanen is making 7 threes in a night and Colin Sexton has it going, and, you know, Jordan Clarkson and Malik Beasley, like, if they have it going, they're probably going to be okay on any given night. But like, this is not a good team. Like, this is still like the 13th best team in the West, even with Bojan Bogdanovic. So I just don't know why they were in a rush. Like, if this is what you were getting, if this was the only thing that you were going to be able to accomplish, where you weren't getting any future facing asset, like, all due respect to Saben Lee, he might make the roster, but like, I don't see him as anything else other than like a third point guard long term until his shot gets figured out. And I have real skepticism on that front. I just don't see why you wouldn't wait. Like, you don't have to do this deal now. I don't think that you're going to win 4 more games in the first 2 months of the season because you have Bojan Bogdanovic on your roster surrounded by all these other guys.
Yeah, I can't speak to the timing, Sam. I have no idea why this was the appropriate deal for them to pull the trigger on, as opposed to any others that they had in the hopper or could have waited on over the next several months. What's striking to me about just Utah's approach to the rebuild in general is that I feel like it's rather thin on high upside wings or athletes that can play at the 3 and 4 spots. Like, they've managed to accumulate a lot of different guards. They've managed to get a lot of younger pieces, but I also think that the pathway to futuristic roster management, as we're seeing, is just length at a lot of different positions and those toolsy, unique pieces to develop. And that's no disrespect to a guy like Talen Horton-Tucker or even Malik Beasley, but I don't know how much they really fit into that mold. So this is, when you look at the accumulation of actual players that the Utah Jazz have acquired over the last 2 months, I don't love the fit together, but I also don't know what this does to give them roster balance in evaluating all of their younger guys. Like Saben Lee, a player who I seem to like a little bit more than you in terms of upside. I like his athleticism. Yeah. I think he's a really good creator out of the pick and roll. If he's sharing any type of court time with Colin Sexton, Talen Horton-Tucker, and Jordan Clarkson, like, what is he doing out there? Because he does a lot of the same things, just not as well. So,
and by the way, like, that's just a small amount of it. Like, he's probably behind Nickeil Alexander-Walker in the pecking order. He's probably behind Leandro Bolmaro in the pecking order. Like, that's the thing. Like, I actually kind of sneaky like Leandro Bolmaro a little bit. He's 8th in the pecking order in terms of being able to get on ball reps on this team. And like, that's kind of who he is like a bigger, like, point forward who can kind of like run the fast break and, create plays with his passing ability. Like, I don't know. It's a weird, like, it feels like there are still more shoes to drop here. I don't know if they're going to drop before training camp necessarily, given that it starts this coming week, but like, I just don't, I don't love the roster. Like, you can make the case they got Ochai Agbaji, great. They got Bolmaro, who's like 6'7". They signed Simone Fontecchio, who's a really interesting like floor spacer out of Italy. But yeah, I agree with you. Like, I'm not a big Malik Beasley fan. I actually like Lauri Markkanen, I think a little bit more than most, but I think that Lauri might be their best player now. Yeah. And I don't know how good that team is if Lauri is your best player. The guy that I do really like that they got that I think fits really well with Lauri is Jared Vanderbilt. Like, to me, if you saw, I think that Tony Jones confirmed this, but I think it was John Gambadoro out of Phoenix said that Phoenix was in the mix to get Bojan Bogdanovic, but they were very insistent that Jared Vanderbilt be included within that trade. I think that's genius for Phoenix. I think Jared Vanderbilt's the kind of guy that's going to help a team win, just like he helped Minnesota win last year. And I think that Bojan would help a team win, just like Bojan has regularly done throughout his career in Indiana, in Utah now. He's a really effective player. I think I'm even a little bit higher on his defense than you are. Like, I think that he's big, he's strong, like, he's physical, he doesn't back down defensively, and like, he makes the right plays. He's just slow, and that got exacerbated in Utah's perimeter scheme where they didn't really have a lot of ability to cut off dribble penetration at the point of attack with Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley. So yeah, I mean, I think that what it comes down to for Utah is they're kind of spinning their wheels here for a minute, trying to churn through some of the guys they got here on within contracts that they just had to take on because you have to match salaries within trades under the collective bargaining agreements rules. And I don't know how many of these guys are going to be on the next Utah Jazz roster that contends. Like maybe Lowry, maybe Sexton, maybe Vanderbilt, maybe Oshai. Like that might be it. Like I put the over under at like 2.5.
That sounds about right. And look, Kelly Olynyk, another guy I just want to bring up here, like 31 years old. I think 12 million this year, only $3 million guaranteed next year. So he might be an appealing enough piece to be able to flip into something else down the line. It's not going to net you much. I don't think that he's worth buying out necessarily, but just an intriguing veteran to have around in a lot of different ways.
And it's worth mentioning Danny Ainge drafted Kelly Olynyk. I'm sure that there are some, like feelings there in terms of really like him. There's a reason that they drafted him. Thinks he's a good player. I guess you can make a case that this balances out Utah's roster a little bit more, like being able to play more of those young guys and then having Kelly as like a developmental floor spacer. But I don't know. I just don't think this team has enough guys that they're trying to actually get eyes on right now for that to even like hold as much water as getting a first round pick and taking on a bit more future money. If that's the opportunity cost, you should just do that, I think.
Well, and if Kelly is supposed to be this great floor spacer that plays well with the young guys and is a good veteran, he probably would have kept that role in Detroit, or at least performed a little better than he did last year. Like it was kind of a down year for him. He struggled to play more than 20 minutes a night. I just think that, it's going to be hard to see more than that role coming for him in Utah.